Welcome to Ask Leo Answercast number 148. I'm Leo Notenboom, and I'll be answering questions that people are asking out at AskLeo.com. Today's Answercast is brought to you by Maintaining Windows XP, a practical guide. Windows XP just won't die. Microsoft ends support for it next month, but still, it's just not going away overnight. If you're running Windows XP and you want to keep it running well for as long as possible, then you owe it to yourself to check out Maintaining Windows XP, a Practical Guide, my nearly 300-page book that'll show you step-by-step how to clean it up, tune it up, and speed it up, and keep Windows XP working for you. There's no risk. It comes with a 30-day, no questions asked, money-back guarantee. Visit maintainingxp.com to order your copy now. Be sure to use the coupon code NEWS20 when you check out for 20% off the cover price of the PDF versions. That's NEWS, all capitals, 20. That code's only for my newsletter subscribers and Answercast listeners. Maintaining Windows XP, a practical guide, is also available in paper from Amazon.com. You'll find a direct link to that on maintainingxp.com. That's maintainingxp.com. Is there such a thing as a computer that's not infected? I've been diligently and faithfully watching my XP for years, and yet I've been invaded by a malware and cannot get rid of it. I'm using AVG 2014, updating it the first thing every day when I turn on the computer, running MS Security Essentials, Malwarebytes Anti-Malware, yet I have been infected with something called Friends Checker that pops up in Firefox and Internet Explorer. I searched high and low for some tool to delete this despicable program, but no luck so far. Googling it is useless as the responses are full of go to Control Panel, choose Friends Checker, and delete it. The program just doesn't show up. I use CCleaner and Advanced Uninstaller, both fabulous tools, but they don't find this program. Noted that I use the free tools. But what I noticed is that this virus seems to have migrated over to my netbook while it is connected to my home network. As a longtime computer user, I'm at my wit's end. Could you please suggest a virus remover program that is better than the ones I've listed? What about deleting Facebook completely? Could that help? I think deleting something from Facebook, people I have no connection to with at all, so I have no problem trying to delete Facebook if it can be done at all. Well, to be clear, deleting Facebook won't help. Facebook is nothing more than a website you visit. It actually doesn't install anything on your computer, so there's nothing to delete. There are occasionally rogue apps that try to install stuff on your computer, but that's usually by having you visit sites other than Facebook where they try to get you to download something. That's more traditional malware, as it does in fact download and install on your machine. Now, I'm not even saying that's how you got this. To be honest, I don't really know exactly how you got it. Somehow, somewhere though, something was indeed downloaded and installed on your machine. The most common for this type of thing that you're seeing is what we would call foistware or a PUP, potentially unwanted program. You download and install something legitimate, something you want, something you choose to download and install. But as part of that download, or as part of sneaking so-called download accelerators, it also includes additional, completely unrelated software. And sometimes that malware is at least annoying and sometimes downright malicious. Sometimes you're given a choice, but very often that choice is hidden and it defaults to yes. That's why I always say whenever you install software, always choose the advanced options or the custom options to look for these kinds of things. Never ever accept the default setup for anything you download and install on your computer. Unfortunately, sometimes there's also no choice at all. You just get it. Now, since this is appearing in your browsers, it's probably some kind of a toolbar. So, step one I'm going to have you do is go to the browsers and check the add-ons and toolbars in each of them and turn off and perhaps try to remove the offending ones. Now, I know you said that suggesting control panel was naive, but in reality, many of these types of things do in fact show up there. And to be clear, it's not enough to just go to control panel. You need to go to the Add Remove Programs or Programs and Features applet within control panel. Basically, it's the place where you would uninstall software that's been installed on your machine. Some will uninstall like any other installed software. If all that fails, and it sounds like it has, then we have to turn to two other approaches. First is to run additional anti-malware tools, which is what you were actually asking about. I would recommend you grab Malwarebytes Anti-Malware. They have a free version available at malwarebytes.org. It's very good at dealing with these kinds of things. Pups and foistware are often high on its hit list. It doesn't get everything. There's no program that does that. But it does get many, and it gets more and more all the time. Second is, of course, to do exactly as you have done, which is to search for specific removal instructions on the internet. Don't let the lack of a control panel entry stop you from reading the rest of the instructions if somebody happens to suggest that. Often there are, in fact, further specific removal instructions. I will warn you to avoid sites that say, just buy this program to remove that problem you're having. Or better yet, as part of their discussion on specific malware, say, run this program to check for malware. Those are typically just sales pages and often very disappointing. Look instead for sites that have step-by-step manual removal processes that don't require you to buy anything. Finally, and I hate to say it, but there are in fact two ways that are guaranteed to remove any malware. One is to restore your machine to a backup that was taken prior to the malware's arrival. It's quick, it's relatively painless, and it's pretty much guaranteed. Now, I'm going to have to assume that you have no backup for that since you're asking this question. So you might want to consider starting a regular backup regime. The second approach is even worse. Back up, reformat, and reinstall your machine from scratch. It's time-consuming, it's very painful, so as you can imagine, it's the last resort. Hi, Leo. I seem to remember reading some time ago that it was not safe to download anything from CNET. Plus, I suffered a malware infection which might have been caused by a download from that site. I've been reading your article about Macrium Reflect and considered downloading the free version from the CNET website. What's your opinion on CNET? Do you think it's safe to download from this site? I'm presently using Windows XP. I actually now recommend that you avoid all download sites if at all possible. There are simply too many stories exactly like yours, downloads that come with much more than is expected. Now, there are good download sites, I just don't know which ones they are. And to be clear, the download sites themselves aren't always the problem. Often, the actual software you're downloading includes the malware that people end up on their machine. But all too often, through download managers, download accelerators, or even direct downloads from these download sites, people are getting much more than they bargained for in the form of malware. My recommendation, always, and I really do mean always, download only from the original manufacturer's website. That means you might need to do a little research to locate that site. But that research really pays off big when you end up avoiding malware or foistware or who knows whatware. Now, there's an odd scenario that we also need to mention, and you're probably shaking your head about this right now because it's the very scenario you're talking about. Some vendors will actually point you at a download site. Macrium does this with their free version of Reflect. It's downloaded from CNET. One important point. Always start at the manufacturer's site. Just because you happen to find the product on the same download site doesn't mean that it's the same or the official product. Only go to the download site via the link provided by the software manufacturer. Now, sometimes you may have no choice. Sometimes the software is only available this way. All I can say is be careful. I've certainly downloaded Macrium free from CNET and it's been fine. However, when you're given the option, always avoid any and all download managers or download accelerators. They're really not that helpful, and often they are the cause of a lot of this problem. Choose instead any direct download link that's offered by the download site. Ultimately, things really are just too risky. Many formerly reputable download sites have lost a tremendous amount of trust in the community. I strongly recommend avoiding them all, unless there's no alternative. And even then, do think twice about whether you really want that download. And for the record, yes, I think you really do want Macrium Reflect. I'm running Windows 8.1. Lately, when I'm in File Explorer and I right-click, the menu takes a very long time to appear. For example, if I want to delete a file, I can use the delete key and get the normal immediate response. But the right-click menu takes seconds to appear. For delete, the keyboard is an easy and fast workaround, even for multiple files. But rename or open with? And yes, I back up. I really do. I've now restored back about as far as I want to go with no improvement. I'd be willing to go further back if there is a specific program I could look for. Any ideas? Windows often gets the blame for this kind of thing, but it turns out it's rarely Windows' fault. If anything, it's Windows' fault for being so accommodating with the various programs that you can install. You may have noticed that programs can add things to that menu that pops up when you right-click on a file in Windows Explorer. Often, when you install software, there might even be an option to the effect of Add Context Menu or something like that. That right-click menu is called a context menu because what it contains varies depending on what you click on, or the context. If you right-click on a JPEG file, you might get some things that you wouldn't see if you clicked on a .doc file, and so on. What happens is that between the time you click and the time that menu is displayed, Explorer needs to figure out which menu items to put on that context menu. It does that by actually running some software provided by each of the programs that might handle a file, asking, is this you? And if so, what should I put on the context menu? If you have a lot of programs installed that potentially provide context menu items, it has to ask each one. Now, normally that's not an issue. It's a pretty quick decision. However, there are scenarios where one of those handlers needs to do some work to determine whether or not it should be on the context menu. It could be as simple as a badly written handler, of course, for one of those programs that you perhaps have installed recently. It could be that you're right-clicking on a file on a network connection or on an idle USB drive, and the handler actually needs to open and read the file a bit to figure out what to do. That could cause a delay while a network connection is reestablished or while a USB drive spins up. And it could also be your anti-malware software looking at the file as well. I've heard that some do and insert themselves at this point. So, what to do? Well, step one, of course, is to think about what software you may have installed recently, especially if you happen to realize that the problem happened about the time that you installed that software. See if they have something that can appear on the context menu. Step two, of course, is to right-click on a number of different types of files and see if you can identify all of the programs that have added things to the context menu. Now, you need to right-click on many different types of files because even though you may not see handlers in the pop-up menu, they're actually getting called, even if they don't have anything to display. In both of these cases, see if there is then an option in the program that you've identified or in its setup to not have a context or right-click menu item. If you can, turn it off. If they don't, consider uninstalling them and seeing if that makes a difference. If it does, look for that option when you reinstall or complain to the vendor if that option doesn't exist. Hi, Leo. I have 2 friends in Europe who do not receive my emails, nor can I get theirs. Neither one of us has the other marked as spam, so what's going on? Well, to be honest, it's almost impossible to say. I will throw out a few ideas based on how the email system might be working, but I really don't know of a direct or specific way to fix this. I do have, however, one workaround for you to at least try. More than likely, the email services used by your friend in Europe have blocked or blacklisted your email service or some portion of it. Not your specific email address, I would expect, but a specific email server associated with your email provider. That happens for a variety of reasons, the most common being that one of your email providers is sending out too much spam. Again, this has nothing to do with you. It's just that the server or service as a whole has at some point been responsible for too much spam. The problem with this technique, of course, that you can see is that it's error-prone. Specifically, false positives happen, such as yours, and legitimate email gets blocked when it shouldn't be. Since in your case it's bi-directional, either your email service has similarly blacklisted that of your friends, or there's a middleman that's part of how email is routed between the two of you that has been blacklisted by both. In either case, it's just not something that I know that you can fix. You can each complain to your email provider, and perhaps they'll research it, but in all likelihood, not a lot's going to change. Unfortunately, it's notoriously difficult to get off of blacklists, in part because there are so darned many. Here's what I recommend you do. Open up a free email account at a different provider. Google Mail comes to mind. Test your ability to send and receive email from your friends. If it works, use that email. You can have it forward incoming mail to your normal email account if you like, though you'll probably need to actually go to and use this second email account whenever you want to send something. Or if you're using a desktop email program, it actually gets kind of simple. You just simply configure an additional account with this other provider and use it when sending and receiving from your friends. Now, like I said, I could be wrong about the blacklisting, but regardless of what happens, it appears to be happening with your respective email providers. As a result, I'm not particularly hopeful that there's an easy way to get it resolved. Thus, my recommendation is that you try an alternate method. At least that is something that's in your control. I run Windows XP Professional on my Dell Optiplex desktop. I also have a 1 terabyte My Passport removable drive for storing of my data by just copying to the drive. I discovered 2 folders suddenly appeared among the folders on that drive. 4 additional folders have now been added to the previous 2. The folders have these numbers: 9C132E36A0FC6471430A1E192. And no, I'm not going to read the other 5 folder names. Each folder contains 2 folders named AMD64 and I386. Only the first folder with the top numbers contains some data. Access is denied each time I want to delete them. How can I delete them and prevent further incursion of these folders onto the removable drive? Well, I do want to be clear. This isn't some kind of malicious incursion. It's actually expected. It's simply a side effect of how some software setup programs operate and sometimes how they don't clean up after themselves. Folders that have these really long numbered names are temporary folders created by software setup programs. At setup time, the installer essentially looks at the disks currently attached to the machine and tries to figure out which one it wants to use. What criteria it uses, I honestly have no idea. I would assume that it is mostly to do with the amount of available space, and your 1 terabyte drive might very well bear that out. I'm surprised that it would choose a removable drive, but once again, there's just no telling what some setup programs might choose to do. In an ideal world, the setup program would remove those folders completely, automatically, when it was done. They might not because they're poorly written. Or they might not because they might be used again later. For example, if you run that setup program again, perhaps to make some changes, it might be able to use the contents of this temporary folder, if it still exists, rather than perhaps asking for a CD or DVD. Personally, I'd rather see it be a choice or just have it automatically removed. But it does what it does, and there's really not much we can do to change that behavior. But we can remove the folders. Once the setup has completed, it should be completely safe to remove those folders and their contents. In most cases, a simple delete should work. In some cases, a delete will fail because some other program has that file open or has a folder open and is still running. For example, if you have one copy of Windows File Explorer looking inside the folder, you might not be able to delete the folder until that program has been closed. Often access denied or other permissions-related messages will result. You might need to run Windows Explorer as an administrator. Even though yours might be an administrator account, you're not actually running with full administrative privileges all the time. Right-click on the icon you use to start Windows Explorer and click on Run as Administrator. Finally, if a program is running from within that folder or if some other program has a file open within that folder, you can also just be prevented from deleting it. Download and run Process Explorer and use its find function, searching for the name of the folder to see what program might have it open. Close that program, and then you should be able to delete the folder. Should I defrag a TrueCrypt volume? And if so, should I do it with the volume open or closed? That's one that I hadn't thought of, and now, in fact, intend to act on. The answer, I believe, is both yes and yes, with one caveat. The caveat I'm going to throw at you is that you should not defragment a solid-state drive. So if your TrueCrypt volume is stored on an SSD, then don't defrag it. Defragmenting is a performance issue, and solid-state drives not only don't really benefit it from all that much, if at all, but there's also some controversy as to whether defragmenting an SSD could actually shorten its life. I just recommend avoiding that issue entirely and only deal with defragmenting on regular spinning platter magnetic media hard drives. Now, a TrueCrypt volume is a single file which, when mounted, you can place files into that are automatically encrypted and decrypted. So you have a file, and within that file, you have other files. It might be worth defragmenting both. First, with the volume dismounted, defragment the drive that contains the volume. So, for example, if you have your TrueCrypt volume on C, defrag C. The good news here is that you really only need to do this once. Since the container never moves, you don't copy it around, you don't grow it, you don't shrink it, it just sits there being a container, it won't get fragmented. Now, when the volume is mounted in TrueCrypt, it appears as another drive, and its contents are treated as another disk drive. That means that the files on this other disk drive can indeed get fragmented. So, next, with the volume mounted, defrag the volume. What that means is if you mount your TrueCrypt volume as, say, drive F, then you would defrag drive F. As it turns out, Windows might not let you. I looked with the Windows defragger, and it told me that defragging was unavailable for my mounted volume. On a whim, I fired up Piriform's defraggler, and it's defragging my TrueCrypt volume as I speak to you right now. If you don't do a lot of work within the drive, it's probably not worth doing it very often. If, on the other hand, files within the TrueCrypt drive are frequently being created and deleted and written and so on, then, yep, a periodic defrag might very well be a good thing. I do the Ask Leo Answercast every week. So if you've got a question about your computer, the internet, or technology, head on over to AskLeo.com to search for the answer or to ask your question. You might hear it answered here on the next Answercast. I also put out a newsletter every week. The Ask Leo newsletter includes answers and fixes, safety tips, opinions, rants, even the occasional answer as to just why things are the way they are. Please back up. I plug this every week because it is so important. Nothing can save you from almost any disaster like a proper and recent backup. Regular listeners are probably getting tired of hearing me say it, but I'm going to keep saying it because it's just that important. All of my answers are based on my own personal experience. and should be used entirely at your own risk. I don't know you, your abilities, or the specifics of your machine, and those details can make all the difference. The Ask Leo Answercast is a production of Ask Leo and is copyright 2014. Thanks for listening. I'm Leo Notenboom, and I'll be back soon with another Ask Leo Answercast.